All right, so yesterday we talked about two new things. We talked about the discriminant, how to figure out how many answers there are, and the quadratic formula to actually figure them out. We're going to start on this sheet with the quadratic formula, which again is this big guy up here. One thing to make note of, that I'm going to throw a little bit of a twist in on you today, you've got to have your equation at equals 0 before you start. If it's not, you've got to tweak that. Otherwise, you're not going to get the right answer. So for instance, on this first one, it's at equals 0. I'm good to go. And again, my A, B, and C's that I need for up here just come from A is the number in front of x squared. B, and the signs do matter, is the value in front of x. And then C is just going to be my value that doesn't have a variable at all. That never changes. Even if I were to switch the order of the values around, that's where I'm always going to find those numbers. So here's my suggestion, sort of like I mentioned yesterday. I am always a big fan of doing this part first instead of trying to bleh it all into the calculator and then having things go poorly for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to deal with the b squared minus 4ac part. I'm going to do that first. It'll give me a little bit of practice for the discriminant too. So b squared minus 4ac, and always use parentheses, because especially with negatives, a lot of stuff can get messed up otherwise. So here's what I'm just going to type into my calculator to start. And again, be really careful with signs or you can really get yourself into a dilemma. So once I'm sure I'm typed in there good. So now, here's when I add a piece to it. Because you're like, well, why are you just doing that? That says square root. And we talked a little yesterday about if you try to do it all at once with all the extra parentheses you need, that's going to mess a lot of you up. So even though I know I need the square root, so I'd have the square root of 225, which is 15. And again, the calculator can tell me that if I hit second next squared, I'll get the square root button, and I can just type the number in. Do you have to put what in? It's probably a good idea to have them, just to be sure. Because now what I can do, once I've got that, okay, thank you, is now I can come back up to here and go, okay, so I'm going to have negative b, which will end up being positive 5, plus or minus the square root that I just got. And then it's over 2 times a, or 2 times 2. So like Cheyenne just mentioned, if I have negative 5, or the opposite of negative 5, that'll make this positive. So this is really 5 plus or minus 15 over 4. And the last thing I have to do, I got one piece left, because I'm not just going to leave my answer this way, because I can simplify it. So I notice it says, well, 5 plus 15. So I'd have 5 plus 15 divided by 4 and get an answer. Yep. And I also have 5 minus 15 over 4 and get an answer. And you're like, do I really have to keep putting these parentheses? And the answer is yes. Because if I don't, okay, I'm going to do it with first, and then I'm going to show you again why you have to do that and why if you choose not to, you're probably going to get some wrong answers. Okay, the correct answer for my first part here is 5. Watch what happens if I decide I'm not going to use parentheses, I'm just going to type in what I see. Ooh. Because what the calculator does is the calculator says in the second one, well, division comes before addition, so I'm going to do 15 divided by 4 and then add 5. Well, that's not what I want you to do. That's why I have to tell the calculator, add those first, then do this. And for this one, subtract 5 and 15 first, then divide by 4. And you can get decimals for answers. but I've got to type things in there correctly if I want it done right. Okay. And again, I'll get you some options on how you can go after these. Some of you may like something a little different of a way, and that's okay. Because some of you may even say, well, can't I just write this in at the start? Because this is all, there's stuff everywhere. Well, let's try it. So again, my A value is the number in front. My B value is the number in the middle. My C value is the number at the end that doesn't have a variable with it. So let's say we try to do it all at once. Let's see what happens. So I have a negative B. The opposite of 7, as I move my calculator over here, the opposite of 7 is negative 7, plus or minus. So then I've got B squared, which would be 7 squared, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. So even if I do write it out in advance, I still would go back and take care of just that part first. So if I did that, again, I'm just going to type in what's underneath the square root. Making sure I type everything in right here. Yes. And then I take the square root of that. I can't just use the 121. I got to take its square root, which comes out nice. So I'm like, okay, so negative 7 plus or minus, and that comes out to 11. And 2 times 6 is 12. And you're like, yeah, this is kind of neater than the other one was. It is. It's more organized. And then I'll just split it. Negative 7 plus 11 divided by 12. And negative 7 minus 11 divided by 12. And again, you can let the calculator help you out on these. There's no shame in that. So negative 7 plus 11. Again, make sure the parentheses are there, though, or we're going to start getting funky answers. You're like, Hardy, that looks like a funky enough answer already. If you want to put 0.33, you can. If you want to go math, enter, and use the 1/3, you could do that too. I am perfectly content with either. And then I just do the same thing one last time for my other one. Negative 1.5 is an absolutely peachy answer. But again, it's all about just putting it into the form, but always working on what's underneath that square root first, because we want to simplify things before we get too far. But otherwise, nothing going too bad so far. Now, let's say I move down a little ways on the sheet here, because I'll come back up if we need to here. Let's take a look at number 11 for a minute. Because here's what I was talking about at the top when I said you have to be equal 0 before you start. I can't do A, B, and C right now. This won't be right. Because this negative 12's over here, and it needs to be 0. So how can I move that negative 12 to the other side? Add 12. So you may occasionally have a first step with these. Negative 25 plus 12 is negative 13. Now it's in a form that I can use because it's in a form where it's equals 0. Once I do that, then I can say, okay, my A is 3, my B is 10, my C is negative 13. Plug it into my formula and get to the right answer. So once I have those values, again, we have negative B, so it's the opposite of whatever number I have here. So since that's positive 10, I'll make it negative 10. Square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times a. And you'll always have access to the formula, so as long as you can just copy numbers carefully, we should be good there. So I'll move up to here. So I've got negative 10 plus or minus. Now I get to dealing with this big guy. And there's the part where I really do need the calculator to help me out. So let's see. 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 13. All right. And then I got to take the square root of that. So once I get that plugged in, all right. So we have negative 10 plus or minus. All this radical turned into 16. And 2 times 3 is 6. And now I'm going to split it. So negative 10 plus 16 divided by 6. And negative 10 minus 16 divided by 6. So yes, negative 10 plus 16 would be 6. Divided by 6 is 1. And then once we have that, we have negative 26 over 6. And that one I don't remember exactly what that is. Okay. And again, if you put negative 4.33, that's fine. If you did math enter, I believe you'd get negative 13/4. No, negative 17. No. Gracious. Negative 13/3. That's better. Okay. But that only happens again. You have that one extra step if this isn't equal 0 at the start. Otherwise, we're just sort of knocking these problems out and getting those values with those. Okay. And I do, for when you're working on these, if you want to check some every once in a while with that, I've got an answer key up at the front. You can even check that if you wanted to make sure things are going well. Now again, this is the quadratic formula. This is the actual answers. However, if you flip over to the back, we get into a little different situation, but that's not a bad thing either, because here it's actually shorter. It says find the discriminant, and I put the formula right above it, of each quadratic, then state the number and type of solutions. Okay, so here's how this works. Again, it has to be in equals 0 before you can start, just like it was on the front. Okay, we're in equals 0. So my A is negative 3. My B is negative 4. And my C is negative 6. So once I have it, I don't have to do the big thing anymore. It's just this. So B squared minus 4AC. And once I get the value for that, I'm going to be done. So this is the perfect means of getting parts done, but not having to worry so much about doing the whole thing. And that's correct. So here, if I get negative 56, anytime I get a negative answer, that tells me I'm going to get no solutions on that. Okay, and then again, we'll hit up another one of these to kind of get you ready to go on these. Let's sneak down to, let's say, number 21. Again, it's not an equal 0 yet. It has to be. So since that's a positive 2, I'll minus 2. And again, only to the part where there's not variables. I'm not minusing 2 to these, just to the number part. 4 minus 2 is 2. And once I get it to equal 0, now I can do what I need to do. And once I have that, just again, the formula right up above at the start of the section, b squared minus 4ac. Negative 4 squared. Let's get this typed in. Yep. Negative 4 squared. And again, if you can do this in your head, that's okay too. Equals 0, which means there's going to be one solution. And yes, you have to put how many solutions there are going to be at the end of it, because that's the whole point of doing the discriminant, is to figure out how many answers are going to be on there to be correct or incorrect. Okay. So your task today is to knock this one out, to finish it up. And some of you had been asking about this sheet from yesterday, and then I'll take this back off. Yes, the what is a metaphor sheet, and if you didn't get one, they're in the Monday folder over there in the Algebra 1s, is an extra credit sheet that you can solve these using, again, the quadratic formula. That's the bigger one. So if you knock this one out, it can get you an assignment back that you may have lost some other time or didn't finish or something like that. Or if you just want some bonus points. So that's kind of what we're on, and tomorrow we're going to get into midpoint and distance. And then, like I said, we'll be looking at a quiz on about Friday on all of this stuff.